and welcome to GameSack. Now, games have to be finished before they're released, right? I mean, not these days. They're released without being finished all the time, but back in the 8 and the 16-bit and even the 32-bit days, they were done before they were released, at least as done as they could be. But what of the betas and the prototypes versions of those games? It's always interesting to see what's changed since then. So let's take a look at some of these prototypes. First up is Revenge of Shinobi on the Genesis. This one was released in North America in December of 1989. And of course, all of North America was totally blown away with how amazing this ninja game turned out. It was also our introduction to the music of Yuzo Koshiro. I mean, some of us had heard his music in previous games like Ys, but this is the first time a composer's name had been seen right on the title screen. It made me feel that Sega loved having good music in their games just as much as I loved listening to it. This prototype, however, is dated as August of 1989 and displays as the Super Shinobi, which is what the game is called in Japan. There's a level select at the start screen so they could easily test the different levels. In the options screen itself is an invincibility mode labeled as no death, again likely for testing purposes. And I like how they misspelled shurikens. Shurikens? As you begin playing, it's very obvious that the game is incomplete if you're familiar with any of the released versions. The very first thing that I noticed is that the music is different in the first stage. And not only that, but the music itself sounds quite a bit different. This is because the drum samples that Yuzo Koshiro used are different here than in the final version. In that one, the drums have a much more deep and muffled sound that was very unique to the game. Here in the prototype, they sound much brighter. Also, apparently not all of the music is complete yet. This version only has 7 tracks, so they repeat often, whereas the final game had just under 20 tracks. Besides the music, some of the sound effects are different or just haven't been included yet. Graphically, some of the stages feature slightly different colors. In fact, I kinda like how blue the prototype version is here. But I definitely prefer the darker background of the released version in the Chinatown stage. Some of the bosses haven't even been finished being drawn yet, which is always kinda funny. Spider-Man, Batman, and all of the pop culture cameos of the initial release version are here. Gameplay-wise, it definitely hadn't been fine-tuned yet, as some of the bosses are way tougher than the released version. In fact, I couldn't even beat some of them no matter how many times I tried. Well, I mean, unless I cheated with the invincibility mode, but yeah. Some of the stages are even missing enemies, like this one, which doesn't even have the attack nuns in there yet. Also, I can't do any crouching attacks, so that means I can't kick or slash this boss here. And I really want to! You can't even harm Godzilla at all. The fight just ends after a few seconds and goes to the next stage. The final boss isn't in here yet, and once you get there, you just win automatically and loop back to the beginning of the game. This was really interesting for me to play through, and it just shows how many changes can be made in such a short amount of time. Speaking of Shinobi, Shinobi 3 came to the Genesis in summer of 1993. This is a great game, but not as good as Revenge of Shinobi. I would say that's just my opinion, but come on, we all know it's true. I usually stop playing at the elevator stage because it's extremely long and boring, just like a GameSack episode. What kinda sucks is that it's so early in the game. I would have liked it if it had been later. It definitely gets better after this stage though. There are a couple of early betas that are interesting. This one is dated 1992, and as you can see, it looks completely different from the final game. There's not much to this one yet, and you basically just need to make it to the right, if you can. The stage will abruptly end, and then you'll be in a new area. The music seems mostly complete though. In fact, this kind of surprises me. Now, I don't know if this is more of a proof of concept than an actual work in progress, but I'm not the developer, so I don't know how Sega proceeded with the design of this particular game. But whatever the case is, it feels like they just put this one in the trash and just started from scratch. Another prototype that's dated 1993 is far more complete. This time it's called Revenge of Shinobi 2, which honestly I kind of like. Many of the enemies are still a different color or design though. And in stage 1, once you get inside the cave, you can still see the forest behind it, unlike the rock wall of the retail version. You also seem to be invincible in this build. In some areas, your shuriken count decreases, while in other areas it doesn't. One thing that I found interesting is that you can't shoot item boxes when you're crouched. Instead, your weapon just flies right above it. And this horse stage goes on forever in this build and nothing really happens. The kites aren't in here, the enemies just run in the background and then attack you in the foreground, and maybe you jump over a tree trunk or something, and it just goes on, and the boss fight isn't even in here yet. They definitely tightened this one up for the released game. The elevator stage is still kind of boring, but at least the alarms aren't going off constantly like they are in the final game. I don't know why they thought we needed that. It also feels like the gameplay has been tweaked slightly for the better once they finished this one up as well. Dr. Mario is a hugely popular puzzle game that got its start on the NES in July of 1990. As a fully qualified and highly ethical doctor, Mario simply tosses drugs at the problem until it goes away. You play the part of the body, I guess, to make sure the right drug gets to the right virus to eliminate it. Fortunately, the pills that Mario is tossing down your throat are color-coded, and just like real life, the viruses are the same color as the pill that kills them. Stack up a few and the virus is gone. Clear the stage of all viruses and you win. So pop those pills whenever you feel bad, kids. But check out this prototype, which is dated early 1990 and is simply called Virus. But it still stars Mario as the quack doctor tossing pills randomly at the problem. And as you can see, Dr. Mario looks a bit different here than he does in the final version of the game. Even the viruses themselves look ever so slightly different here. Over on the left, there's a dog who keeps sneezing and a nurse holding an ice pack on his head. The dog never gets cured, even when you beat a stage, so that just goes to show you how good of a Dr. Mario really is. The options on the start menu are also different. The fall down means the other half of the vitamin will fall down if the first half was used to clear some of the colors or a virus. The virus level is your starting stage, and it can go up to 24. The game level is basically your speed option. Also, there's no music in this one. Anyway, let's take a quick look at Batman, which came out on the NES in February of 1990. This is a great game that's fun to test your skills on. You've got to memorize a lot of the patterns in this one, and they're super fun to learn and relearn years later because you haven't played it for way too long like me. This one has cinema cutscenes in it that may make you think you're actually watching the movie instead of playing a video game. But look at this prototype from 1989. The cutscenes are almost completely different. They have text, dialogue, and everything. And I kind of like them, even though the plot is only vaguely similar to the movie. In fact, it makes me wonder why they were changed. As far as the game itself goes, it seems mostly fine, save for a few tiny and uninteresting differences. Like telling you how many lives you have remaining at the start of a stage instead of the stage number. And it also has an invincibility mode, which I didn't bother enabling. It's probably there so magazine reviewers could cover it better and get shots of later stages. Or maybe even for testing purposes. Isn't it fascinating to see how much things can change over time? Well, I think it is anyway. They often had to make these games as ready as they could to show off to the press at trade shows, like this next one. Aladin was released on the Genesis in November of 1993. This one started development in January of that same year, so it was made fairly quickly. It's known for having its sprites drawn by the Disney animators themselves. As a result, the animation is very fluid and quite faithful to the movie. The game roughly follows the movie with lots of liberties taken for the sake of gameplay. It does feel a bit loose to control sometimes, and often you can't see where you can walk, but that's kind of a trademark of stuff from Virgin Games. The collision detection is often kind of wonky, like these sliding platforms. I should not be falling through that, but I am. Still, there are lots of different stages here that'll keep you busy. But check out this prototype, which is dated June 27th, 1993. This was made to be shown off to the press of the Consumer Electronics Show of that year. Though the CES show is at the beginning of June, so I don't know what's going on or who to trust anymore. At this point, the game had only been in development for about 6 months and had nearly 5 more to go. This prototype starts you on a screen allowing you to select your level. Pressing start takes you to the title screen and then the stage you selected. And pressing start at any time after that will return you to the main menu. That is, unless you have the exciting freezability feature enabled. If it is, then pressing start pauses the game, but only while you hold down the start button. There's also a map mode that will let you scroll the screen around to see the entire stage. Aside from that, the game is exactly the same as the released version, with the exception of everything that's different, which is a lot. Firstly, some of the sprites are still done with a pencil and haven't been colored in yet. And that's a crazy thing to see in a video game. However, that's how Disney does its animation, and it makes sense to have these kinds of placeholders in here. Some sprites, like certain icons scattered throughout the stage, are different. There are even enemies in here that sadly didn't make the final game. The game is also much harder at this point in development, as they likely had not done much balancing yet. Weirdly though, these platforms are a lot easier to land on here. I wonder why they made it so I could fall right through them in the final version. I really like Abu's bonus stage in this one. It's very similar to the final version, but I just had a bit more fun with this one. The Genie's bonus stage doesn't seem to be in here yet. The cinematic cutscenes that precede each level are different, and they'd be redrawn and reworded for the final version of the game. Some stages aren't even close to being complete yet, like this Cave of Wonders stage. Thankfully, I don't seem to be dying, but I don't think I can win this one either. The Inside the Lamp stage has gone through significant changes from this version. It's similar, but Goofy's head is here and there's no music yet. And it's also virtually unplayable at this point unless I'm just completely doing it wrong, which is likely. I suck at games. One interesting change is that in the final version, the genie is dressed as a referee by the Sega logo when you power up the game. But in this one, he's dressed as a busty cheerleader. I guess maybe Sega was having none of that. The music has been moved around as well compared to the final game. The desert stage seems to have music I haven't even heard before. I certainly don't remember this tune at all from the released version. All in all, it's truly amazing how the game progressed in less than 5 months, mostly for the better. Next up is Castlevania Bloodlines from Konami on the Genesis, which was released in March of 1994. I talked about this game a few months ago when I covered all of the 16-bit Castlevania games, so if you want to hear all of my thoughts on this one, be sure to check that video out. We also did this one on playing with sax. So I'll just sum up the release version of the game here by saying that you've got to play it, and it's definitely worth your time to get good at. This prototype, which is dated November of 1993, is generally assumed to actually be earlier than that, and I agree with that assessment judging by the condition of the build here. The first thing that I noticed is that they hadn't turned on the blast processing yet, so your characters move noticeably slower. Actually, the entire game seems to be plagued with slowdown issues, which happen at the drop of a hat. Even the music can slow down a little bit sometimes. And whenever you complete a section of a stage, the music starts over from the beginning instead of just continuing like it does in the final release. Next, quite a few things look different, including many of the enemies which have changed for the release version. Compare these mermen, for example, or the mini-boss of Stage 1. I still think he looks cool in this early form though. If you choose to play as Eric, his entire walking animation has been changed for the final revision of the game. Which do you prefer? His animation going upstairs is pretty funky here too. This stage doesn't have the second background layer in it yet, so it looks pretty dark since there's no blue wall back there. The platforms that you can float on here are definitely placeholder graphics. And look! The Medusa heads look kind of weird and they even stick their tongue out at you. And of course, the gameplay isn't completely balanced yet, so what works in the final game certainly doesn't work 100% of the time here. And suffice it to say, I died more than I care to admit on this bone bridge here. And I'm not sure if you can even defeat these enemies before you drown, not without using a special weapon anyway. Some enemies aren't even in here yet, like the 2 giant metal guys after defeating the water dude. And what are these harpies doing in this stage? They belong in the next one. That goes for these guys too. Once you get to the stage 2 boss here and win, it just resets the game back to the beginning of stage 1. There are more stages on here, but you have to access them by doing the Konami code on the title screen. Here's stage 3-1. I have a feeling that this stage isn't quite finished yet. There aren't any enemies here, and getting to the end puts you at the beginning of stage 2-2. Stage 3-2 is here as well, but also without enemies and slightly reconfigured. Beating this puts you on stage 3-3, which has barely had any work done on it at all yet. All you can really do is fall down to the bottom. Eventually you'll get stuck there and there's nothing you can do. It's really interesting to see all the refinements that they made to this. Honestly, it makes me appreciate the end product that much more. Alright, I know I've been covering a lot of Genesis games so far, but hey, they have the most interesting prototypes, at least that I can find. But here's a Super Nintendo game just for you, followed by a Genesis game. The Lion King came to all available platforms in late 1994 and early 1995, and this is the Super Nintendo version. Obviously, you play as Simba both as a cub and later as an adult. This game is awesome, at least from a technical standpoint when it comes to its graphics and sound. But you don't play this game plays you. That's right, it can be pretty brutal, even as early as stage 2. For example, sometimes when I'm riding the ostrich and do the double jump, I land back on him and I'm fine. But other times he's not even there, and of course that means I'm a dead kitty because you're not supposed to touch the ground. And don't even get me started on these hippo tails. I don't believe I've ever even made it across here, not without cheating anyway. I think if I were 6 to 10 years old and my parents bought this game for me, I would have grown up to become a serial killer. Thankfully, the cheat code lets you actually practice and maybe even see some other stuff in the game. Now, check out this undated prototype. As you can see, Simba and the other sprites aren't quite complete yet. And while there's music, there's no sound effects. Some sprites are simply just outlines or wireframes at this point. Disney did the animation in this one as well, but apparently they've refined the way they do it for games instead of just having pencil sketches as placeholders. Simba can float around the level using the L and R triggers. The boss fight is here, but it's hard to do damage to him. In the final game, you only need to hop on him once or twice, not here. But if you die, you can just press the select button to get a new life. You can eventually beat him, but you're stuck in this stage forever. The next beta is much later on in the development process. Some of the enemies are still a bit different, like these bugs. It's almost impossible to avoid taking a hit after you bounce on them before they explode. I'm glad they ended up fixing that. You can beat the stage boss, but it's a crapshoot if it decides to take you to the next stage or not. This one plays the same, except there are no indicator arrows when you're on the ostrich. Oh, and the game will crash randomly. The last prototype of the game seems nearly complete. Everything that I can see appears to be as it is in the final version of the game. But check this out, I was actually able to make it past the hippo tails without cheating. I assure you that this was 100% pure luck and 0% skill. Of course, if I die after this point, they make sure I start out before the hippo tails. Yeah, good. I'm not sure which of these prototypes is the one where they decided that angering children and adults alike would be the best way to proceed, but I'm gonna say probably the second one. Still, with some fine-tuning, they could have made this a fantastic game. Here's Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition for the Genesis, which was released on the system in September of 1993. This 24 cart had pretty much all of the same features as Street Fighter II Turbo on the Super Nintendo, and it was actually supposed to come out before that. But of course it didn't because, you know, it's Sega and Nintendo is the priority. Stupid Sega owners, that'll teach you for not choosing the mighty Super Nintendo, you idiots! Nah, I'm just kidding. The voices are pretty much trash, but some argue that they're better because they're not truncated and sped up like the ones on the Super Nintendo. And the music could go either way, it's good on both systems. Back when the first Street Fighter II came out on the Super Nintendo in July of 1992, Sega owners always wanted a version of it for their console. A 6-button controller was announced along with Capcom as a new third party for the console. And indeed they did start developing a port of Street Fighter II Champion Edition where you could play as the bosses. And that's what this version is, even though the title screen only calls it ST2-Turbo. There's nothing turbo about this version though, as it runs at the same speed as normal Street Fighter II. Some other notable differences between this and the retail version of Special Champion Edition is that this one's graphics are even more washed out. Many of the colors used differ from the final game, as do some of the background layouts, at least slightly. It seemed like they weren't trying very hard with this one. Also, the music is different. The drums have a lot more bass in them, and the music as a whole sounds a bit beefier. Check it out. The voices are pretty much the same, which is to say awful, but there are a lot less of them. And they never overlap each other either. In the final game, the voices do sometimes overlap, and on the Genesis to do this, you need to cut the sound quality in half, at least. In the prototype here, your punches and kicks play a funny sound instead of the normal whooshes that you hear in any other finished version of the game. But the story of this prototype is what makes it really interesting. According to legend, this was presented to Sega, who was reportedly not happy at all with it, especially after it was announced that the superior Street Fighter II Turbo would be released on the Super Nintendo first. It's also reported that Capcom may have farmed this version out to a different developer. Regardless, Sega demanded that they go back to the drawing board and rework the game, which they did. I remember reading in some of the magazines back in the day complaining about the big, ugly black border around the game. I don't know, this seems kind of silly to me. Anyone who actually complained back then about the border was an idiot, and likely still is today. Why is that? Well, check it out. The Super Nintendo version was letterboxed even more than the prototype, and not one person at any magazine ever complained about the black borders. Unless Nintendo just gets a pass on these things for some unspoken reason. I mean, why would you complain about the Sega version, which has 6 more pixel rows of graphics? The final version had borders that were nearly equal in size, but with only 1 more pixel row of visual information compared to the prototype, so I highly doubt that was one of Sega's complaints. Otherwise, Capcom did a fairly good job of getting things up to par for the final release. They added in a turbo mode that you can adjust without putting in a code for faster gameplay, they added crappy overlapping voices, slightly better graphics, and better gameplay. Still, I'm glad I was able to play this infamous first version. While it's not as bad as the magazines made it out to be, it certainly did need someone like Sega to come in and tell them that it wasn't good enough. Alright, so that was all the prototypes for every game ever released in the history of mankind, except for the ones that I forgot. So let me know which ones I forgot. Actually, let me know which ones are actually interesting to look at and why. And if I can gather enough, maybe I'll do another one of these episodes in the future. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack. I sure am pointing at the camera lens a lot in this episode, but that's because I like you. are the lights on? Saturn, huh? Yeah. Play some of this and my favorite, Street Fighter. Now for some sweet 32-bit action that can only be provided by the Sega Saturn.